And we're back with sun through the houses. We're almost at the end of it. 11th house today. So 11th, 12th, and then we can go to another planet. This one was the longest for real from all the ones we've done.
Yeah, but I bet you moon will be kind of long too.
Yeah, moon is super important too, like the sun. And yeah.
Probably want to run through the significations again.
Yeah, I'll do that quickly. So the sun, primary keyword soul, followed by consciousness, self-concept, center of being, ego, identity. And then another category will be about light, clarity, visibility, daytime, vision, fame, as well as our careers. And then we have government, governance, authority figures, leaders, leadership, father. And then the sun's qualities is about being center of being. So in that sense, is reliable, it's stable, it's about confidence, being self-possessed, just having a very stable sense of self and being a center. So these are the general primary significations for the sun. My mic was tilted. I hope the sound went through. And then for the significations of the 11th house, we should do that too. So the primary theme in the 11th house is how do we benefit from society? So now we're coming to some sort of a back and forth relationship with society that is about give and take, and we're supposed to be able to benefit from it. And in this way, it has a lot to do with our ability to enjoy. Enjoyment comes out of the 11th house in general, and as we'll see, is a Kāma house. It has to do with artistic talents, performance, stage, and if you think about it, I'm going to explain as I go through the key significations. The axis opposing it is a very creative house. So you were doing the creating there. Now you're performing it on stage, which would be the 11th house.
So basically your 11th house, you're supposed to enjoy there.
Yes, it's how we enjoy and benefit from society. It's very much a house of enjoyment. Yes.
Okay, because I was going to say, is that why they call it the house of gains?
Yeah, we'll get there. I'm just going through the signification and kind of making some attachments to it. And the reason why I'm doing that is because this is a house that is often misrepresented because it gets mixed up with Aquarius. And the 11th house also represents places of enjoyment, like going to the movie theater, going to plays, going to concerts, things of that nature. So you can either be performing on the stage or going there to watch someone. It also has to do with our connections and networks, and it has to do with our friendship, but they're more casual friends. You know, you go for happy hour with your workmates, and social media like Instagram and Facebook, things of this nature all fall into the 11th house. Sorry, there's like a mosquito going around. Oh no. The 11th house also has to do about economic instruments, because you have such a wide network that you can actually make a profit or gain from it. And those gains also become the way that we enjoy things. Like when we think about fixed assets, the way that it goes into the second house or wealth, they require a lot of responsibility and maintenance. But this kind of an income can also attach itself to that Kāma aspect. It's like easy come, easy go. You can even think of it like that. It's more incoming gains in smaller increments. It's not like the second house gains. And basically, yeah, we can profit from it. And basically that's the signification of the 11th house, the primary themes in the 11th house, the environment of it.
So is 10th house is the fame aspect, but the 11th house is the stage?
10th house was the career, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's what you're doing and what you are known for because of what you're doing. In the 11th house, the primary thing that we have to remember is how do we enjoy some aspect of society and culture. So the praise that one might get comes in a terms of the way that it satisfies you, and doesn't come with the obligations of a career, is coming through the 11th house. Like an actor, right? When they're acting and there's a big production behind them, they're doing their 10th house stuff. But when they're going to the premieres and they're like marketing and advertising, and that's how they're actually going on social media, on TV shows and etc., that's the 11th house. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. And I want to bring, like we talked about other planets, but I didn't bring this up because this sun is really gonna illuminate why this aspect that I'm just going to talk about is so important that we touch on in the 11th house, because sun has dissonance to the 11th house. It has many points where it resonates also, but we'll see that Sun comes to have some severe tension points in the 11th house. And one of the reasons for that is because, yes, it's about the house that we enjoy or we get to profit from society. However, we're still talking about society. We're still talking about culture. We're talking about a dynamic where we have to go back and forth with it. So the 11th house very much, because of the social aspect of it related to society, it's talking about collective dynamics and it has a social focus, is egalitarian. We have to approach it in that kind of a way. We have to be inclusive when it comes to the 11th because we're constantly negotiating with these people that might even be impersonal. They're not our person, but they're just part of our network. So it has a cooperative kind of a spirit, the 11th house. And the need for equality is very much there. And then when we think about the sun, we're talking about our individual self, our soul, our personhood. So if there's the slightest bit of self-inclination in the 11th house, which can very much come with the sun, especially since the sun represents ego, and as we'll see, a lot of the clashes with the sun will come through this ego concept. It starts to be at conflict with this being cooperative, being equal. The sun's like, I'm your leader. What do you mean? I'm telling you what to do. I'm not talking about reciprocity here in that kind of a way. So these are the kind of things that comes to be at a bit of a clash with the sun. This is also one of the reasons why the 11th house and the sign of Aquarius are mixed up, because Aquarius does have to do with being humble, being at service of other people. And this is why it's a natural sign of the 11th house. As we'll see once when we get to the signs, Aquarius and 11th house are so different. You actually have to use a bit of imagination to mix them up. But because of this collective nature, the social component in the 11th house that requires equality, being egalitarian, these kinds of things comes to confuse people thinking Aquarius and the 11th house are about the same thing. The 11th house is very much about enjoyment, and the sign of Aquarius is not all that much about enjoyment. So there's a sharp disjuncture or difference, and we shouldn't mix them up. I just wanted to mention that quickly. And that was it.
But the 11th house is so okay, because we've talked about this before. This is it's your social circle, but it's more like acquaintance circle more than like friends.
Yeah, it's more. Remember, the second house was
your friends, like family.
Yeah, like lifelong friends. Third house are your friends, like your besties can go in the third house. And then 11th house, they're people that, you have friends, you talk to them once every 6 months. You're super comfortable with them too. It's like the last time you talked and this time when you're talking is like you left off where you were. It doesn't mean that there's weird formality or you don't know them, but they're not in your everyday life.
Okay, but so it is still friends.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, so it's not just like random like acquaintances or like
no, it
people
doesn't
your
have
work.
Yeah, no, it doesn't have to be like that, but those people are also included in the 11th house.
And then is it also like I've also heard, I probably asked you this in another video, elder siblings. I was about to say elderly siblings.
It's ninth from the third, so it can be your eldest siblings too, yeah.
Okay.
So let's start with a bit of a positive and the upside with the resonance between the sun and the 11th house and how it can work itself out. And if the sun is in good condition, it's strong, it has good dignity, and it's getting good aspects, sitting with planets that support it, then we can say that the sun's functional here. And when the sun is functional, we can get, because the sun represents visibility and fame, we can get a person who is very much recognized in the public, that have a wide range of social network and they're known in that context. So it enhances their ability to shine within their social circle. So the sun can do this.
When you say it's functioning well, like maybe just if somebody's watching, how would you, like for somebody who's kind of starting out, how would they know if it's a functioning sun, or is that too much?
It is a bit off topic for this discussion because you have to scale the chart. I'll say it briefly because you have to scale the birth chart and then scale all the subcharts relative to the birth chart or plus the birth chart.
Oh, so it's not just like it's sitting in this house or this sign or this. Oh, so it's not as simple as like just looking at your D1 and being like it's sitting in this nakshatra or this sign or.
Yes, like we will give the sun a point for being in certain houses in D1. And then we will scale it down if it's sitting in certain houses because the sun is visible and is a daytime planet, for example. You actually want the sun in the public sector of your chart rather than in the private sector of your chart. So that's like one of the factors. As I said, the sun is a daytime planet. If you were born at night, it's going to get another point deducted, for example. Is the sun sitting in a friend sign or an enemy sign or neutral? These get different scales based on that. Is the sun debilitated, exalted in its own sign? Is it in
so there's a whole point system.
Yes, because it's determining the strength of your sun and the condition of your sun. And there's actually a lot that goes into it.
Okay, so from the layman's point of view, they can't just glance and be like, oh, it's sitting in Cancer, or it's sitting in whatever. And
right.
Okay.
But they can do certain things that's from a first glance. Is the sun exalted or debilitated? Is the sun in a friend sign or an enemy sign? Is the sun in a feminine sign or a masculine sign? Because the sun is a masculine planet. You want it in Aries, Sag, Leo, even Mercury sign, Gemini, better than Virgo. So yeah, you want to, you can look at these things on a very surface level and it'll give you a feeling right off the bat about your D1. My sun is sitting in a feminine sign, such as Taurus, for example. This is a very masculine planet. That sign wants to cooperate. The sun wants to lead. It's gonna clash. And like with the 11th house needs cooperation in order to be functional. The sun wants to be the boss. Well, if you want to be the boss of your social network, it better be in a work context because in a social context, you're going to have problems, right? So you can use a bit of logic if you have the fundamentals of astrology and you'll know the condition of your sun.
Okay.
How well is it? And then the aspects, right? We know that Saturn and Sun are going to create tension. When you bring a Cazimi in a chart, for example, if you have your Venus in the heart of the sun, Cazimi?
Yeah.
So every planet will combust at a certain degree away from the sun. So that means that the sun's going to burn out the significations of that planet. So let's say you have Venus at a Cazimi point. So it's pretty much conjunct sun, let's say at the same degree. It can actually overshadow what that planet signifies. It's that's what the sun does. That's why it's a mild malefic. It burns up the significations of things. And when a planet's sitting at the heart of it, it just overpowers them. And all you see is the sun quality rather than the quality of that planet. Some people want to say that it will augment and illuminate the qualities of that planet, but it actually burns its significations. So we see the sun. Where we want to see Venus, which is all about cooperation and love and harmony. We're seeing a leader. We're seeing someone very assertive. We're seeing that masculine quality that's coming out of the sun rather than the feminine quality that comes out of Venus. So that kind of a condition in the 11th house or any house will create a different kind of a dynamic too, right?
Yeah, because if the 11th house is like the common man or like, society, and you're not cooperating and you're basically just all about you.
Or the sun just trying to be I'm your leader, I'm the boss, I'm telling you what to do. This is a house where you're supposed to be inclusive because you're supposed to cooperate, not even just with one person. Like in the 5th house, we were just supposed to love one other person and just love our kids, which are just a few. This is where you're like on Instagram and you got to just keep sending hearts just to show your cooperation and your involvement. Otherwise, the other people will not collaborate with you. And the sun could be like, I'm doing everything better than everyone else. Everyone else is copying me. Like, why would I like that person? You got to show inclusivity in the 11th house to make it functional, right? So the sun,
you almost have to fake it.
well, that's
like
not
to make it work,
good, right?
I know, but that's what I'm saying. If you have this position,
Yeah.
is it almost like you just have to keep constantly like, I mean, maybe it starts as faking it, but you're basically, like you said, I don't know, including people wanting to know their opinion, even though you probably don't. Like, I guess I'm just trying to say, if somebody has this, how would they manage it?
To be a good leader also includes inclusivity, right? So it's like a good leader doesn't just tell people what to do, they do it themselves and they set the example, for example. That's a kind of a inclusivity that the sun can demonstrate. But what you're talking about, like faking it, hopefully Mercury is conjunct the sun in that house. And then that person could use Mercury's adaptability and chameleon-like behaviors when it wants to be. And Mercury is about relationships, friendship. So it just softens up that quality and maybe someone can do that. But if you just have the sun in the 11th house, you're going to get burnt out doing that. And then you want to have a strong self-concept, especially if it's a good condition. If it's a sun that's in good condition, you don't want to, because for the sun, it's not like fake it till you make it. For the sun, if I fake it, I'll never make it because I'm not even myself. Or it's like telling people when they break up with someone, tell them just pretend you're not hurt. You can't do it. So the sun in the 11th house has a hard time doing that because
So is that what it is? Like the sun is more like, I am who I am, deal with it?
especially if it's like struggling, I'll make that statement. But if it's a good condition sun, I'll be like, okay, I cannot necessarily follow other people's lead, but let me be the greatest example. And then hopefully maybe they will follow by example.
Yeah.
So it can have that kind of a quality. And the sun in the 11th house is also indicating that this person either has this right because the sun's in a good condition, or they're constantly grappling with it, which is to have a sense of self based on your social status. You know, when we were in elementary, more so high school, you have all these cliquey little groups in high school and
Yeah.
who's the popular kid and who are like the unpopular kids, and you're trying to get your social status in the school.
Mean girls. Mean
Yeah.
girls.
Yeah. So it's so 11th house has this kind of a feel. So you got your status in the 11th house, but now it's like, how do you enjoy it and how do you profit from it? A lot of people put a lot of currency on their status in the world. They get
But your status was in the 10th, was it not?
you got your status in the 10th. Now, how are you going to enjoy it? How are you going to,
Oh.
because of your status, now you can get your Louis Vuitton or your Gucci. Now you're going to wear it in the 11th house. You're going to go to social gatherings and you're going to be noticed for that designer brand.
Because of the sun?
Because, especially because of the sun,
Okay.
because the sun's illuminating the light on you, right? And the sun has to do with your identity. So here, the status is no longer related to what you do. When you have the sun in the 11th house, you're internalizing that status as your identity and you want to flaunt it in the social worlds and social gatherings.
Wait, so I guess what I'm trying to say is like in the 10th, what if you don't have like what if your 10th is really bad? But because the sun is in the 11th, it doesn't matter. Like you're still gonna, that's what I was trying to, like, is it dependent on the 10th?
Everything in the chart is a continuity and it's telling a story. But let's put it this way. Let's say someone doesn't even have a career per se. They're like a socialite. That's the 11th house, right?
Okay.
So it's not career in a traditional sense of like you had to climb up and you just inherited this money, you're a socialite, you still have status.
Okay.
Right?
So it's not, yeah, regardless, irrespective of the 10th.
Yes, but funny enough, you perhaps got that status from your inheritance and your lineage, like your father from the 10th house. Now it's moving with you into the 11th house. Maybe you got it from your in-laws because you married someone. The 10th house represents your mother-in-law. So there is still a continuity. If we really want to dig, we'll see that somehow they're following one another from one house to another house. Is telling a story. This is why astrology is beautiful, because if you keep digging, you'll see that, oh my God, there's this narrative is like a chain of events, even though it seems like there's nothing happening in the previous house.
So when you do a reading, you basically, that's kind of how you start. You go, obviously you'd ask someone what their focus is on, but in general, you go from house to house and through the progression, they get to understand.
Yeah, that's what, especially when do like life narrative counseling, that becomes like one of the things that we do, because everyone's trying to understand their narrative, right? And the blueprint, that birth chart, is telling the story. So yeah, it comes in handy. But yeah, there's definitely a connective narrative, and 9th house, 10th house, and 11th house are in the public sector of the chart. So naturally they have a connection. Not only they're in the public, but if we remember, the 9th house was, how do we benefit society? And it was a Dharma house. We come to the 10th house, still the public sector. Now that we benefited society, now based on the kind of work that we're doing, how we're showing up in the world, what our sense of purpose is, this becomes our career, right? It becomes part of our status and what we're known for. Now we're coming to the last house that has to do with this sector of the chart, which is the public, and it's a Kāma house, is a house about enjoyment. We are finally getting a taste of the fruit of our labor in the 9th and the 10th house. I'll leave the Kāma part for the end. I was just gonna say how the sun does. My brain was just branching off. So a second ago, I was saying that the sun gives us social visibility in the 11th house. And when the sun is in good condition, this works out for the person, you know, because it can help you in terms of your career. For example, let's say you're on Instagram. You want to have, if you have a sun in the 11th house, you want it to be in good condition, because especially if you're trying to make a profit out of these kinds of mediums, you want to be noticed. So the sun here is indicating that you will be noticed in this kind of a social network. When there's dissonance and when the sun's acting dysfunctional, even with this signification, someone's ego identity comes to be configured around this validation that they're getting from their social group. This is one of the biggest problems that we'll see with the sun in the 11th house when it comes to its dissonance. It has to do with that signification of the sun that has to do with ego or being too authoritative. Like basically everything's going to come down to these two factors, because the fame part of it works, all of it works. There's just these two factors that keep creating problems. So a person becomes too dependent on validation, acknowledgement. Who they think they are is how the world, that 11th house network of people, are receiving them. And then they can have problems harmonizing with other people in this dynamic. They just come to head-on clash all the time with other people. And then this creates a risk of alienation for the sun in the 11th house. The sun couldn't be inclusive. Now other people are pushing the sun native away too. So they feel alienated and they feel like they have to withdraw to protect that ego again, because it's not getting the acknowledgement and the inclusivity that it wants. So the struggle here becomes about, how do I maintain my sense of self and my individual sense of person with this collective identity? You know, the personal identity and the collective identity can come into a clash here when the sun's not in good condition. Now, another point is, sometimes it's very nice to have as your friends within the 11th house context someone who has a very good, strong sun. You know, when people want to do a social gathering and there are 20 people involved, no one can make a decision. This is a problem with democracy. Too many people have to vote sometimes. And it's like, what the hell are people voting? Like, can we come to a consensus, please? You have a sun here. The sun's like, children, sit down. I will lead you. I will lead the way. They do all of the planning. They do all of the booking. And then next thing you know, everyone's organized and they're just following the leader. So in this sense, the 11th house, in any kind of a group dynamic, social dynamic, they can become the planners, the coordinators, the leaders. And when it's invited and when they know how to do this, they are of utmost value, because things actually happen in the 11th house. People can actually gather up and go to the theater because of this native with the sun in the 11th house. So they kind of govern. They can govern the dynamics of the 11th house, which can kind of be chaotic sometimes because everyone wants to have fun. This is a house of enjoyment.
So this also makes someone who has who's well connected, just because we're having the sun in public sector.
Yeah, and they'll be well known if it's a good condition sun. Yeah, they're well connected and people
Like
want to be connected to them. Sorry.
okay. Oh yeah, yeah, that's what I meant. I wasn't really talking about the fame part. I was saying like they have like friends in high places kind of thing.
They could be the person who's in high places too, right?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Because they're so illuminated. And a lot of people, like the sun and 11th house person could get a lot of attention when they make themselves go into the environment of the 11th house. And I was talking about like status being something that has a currency in the 11th house. So when you're with the sun person, fame by association, all the qualities that the sun brings, the person will get them by associations because they're so lit. Now, if you're with them, you're also going to be seen. Like I'm sure there are, I can't think of anyone from top of my head, but celebrities where people know their friends, for example, just because they're the friend of the celebrity. Now they have a certain kind of a status within society, you know?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just the only thing that comes to be a dissonance with the sun in this respect is that, again, that cooperative aspect of things.
A little hindered, wouldn't it actually cause quite a problem? Because if it's a
Yeah, I'm
house
trying
of
to be nice.
okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
because on the one hand, they can like coordinate everyone, they can be the governor of that, but you still have to get the input and the voice of other people. So it's like everyone is voting to decide what time to go to a club, and then the sun will make a plan to go to a restaurant. So it's not necessary. If it's not in good condition, it's not cooperating with people. It's self-asserting in a very overwhelming way. So yes, this will create problems and it's hindering enjoyment that's supposed to be in the 11th house. It's like, let me tell you what to do. And people are like, no, that's not what we want to do. Right. And the sun has a seriousness to it. Sun is not serious like Saturn's seriousness, where it can even go into like somberness and heaviness. But sun is very objective oriented. It's like illuminating the way for you. If you're here, destination is over there. This is how you get to it. And this is a house of enjoyment. And a lot of part of enjoyment is just like that mingling aspect that's in the 11th house. The sun wants to have an objective of why I'm mingling with this person or why we should mingle. What is the purpose of our gathering? And this could be annoying to a lot of people. This is a sun that will go on a vacation and will have an itinerary. Like we wake up at 8
I
and
know someone exactly like that.
yeah, we go scuba diving at 11. We must be at lunch at 12:30. And it was like, we're on a vacation.
I don't know if they have sun in the 11th house, but I would
Yeah.
assume just by that description,
Yeah.
like to the T, like has everything scheduled.
They're taking away the enjoyment of the 11th house. And this is why I'm saying then they can get alienated in the 11th house. Because next time there's let's say a vacation for the social gathering, they don't invite the sun. They're like, this guy's a party pooper, man. Every time he comes, he's just like a dictator. Forget it. So you could get that kind of a dynamic out of the sun.
And what about, since you mentioned the father?
Yeah.
So this position, does it say more about the father or more about the person?
This is one of those houses is more about the person, especially their ego identity. Because, you know, I was saying in certain houses, we don't need to focus so much, even when the sun's not on a good condition, on its ego. Like in the 4th house, which is the private sector of life and has to do with family, it's the backstage of our life. These are people who we've known. I mean, they saw us in our diaper. They saw us poop ourselves. You can't apply the ego identity with the family because they read behind the persona and the stage mask that we put on to be able to negotiate with the world. But in the 11th house, it's got an impersonal feel to it. It's our network, it's our acquaintance. We put on the mask. On social media, for example, on Instagram, everyone looks like they're living the greatest life ever. That's the mask of, that's an ego mask. That's a mask that we put on and the persona we portray in public because we want to be seen a certain way. We want to be engaged a certain way. So we do that, but we can't do that in the 4th house because they know us for the most part. A lot of families, I'm sure there are some that don't, but majority, most. But 11th house is one of those houses where we actually need the persona. We need that ego identity, and both ego and identity and even persona comes from the sun. So and the father, not something like, what is the father doing in the 11th house? What we could talk about that the father of the person may have had these qualities, but the chart should be also saying something about the person because they are the owner of that chart.
By looking at that sun sitting in the 11th, they may be like, okay, does that show the relationship with my father? Does that show the influence of my father? Does that show I've become like this because of my father? Or
yeah, if they ask specific questions about their father, you're going to be looking at 10th house, 9th house.
oh, okay, so just
yeah.
okay, but the sun sitting in the 11th doesn't really that's I was just asking, like, does that in itself on its own tell you anything about the person's father?
Everything that we talked about right now so far and everything we will talk about from here forth could be something related to the qualities of the father within the context of the 11th house and the sign where sun is sitting in. Look at the ruler of that, and then
I guess I was just asking because
follow
you
it
talked
through.
about like somebody could have just been a socialite or famous or whatever. Like, could it also just mean they're famous because of their father? Like maybe they had a famous father.
It could, depending on the rest of the chart, yeah.
Like, are they inheriting like
And
not just money? Like they're inherited by the sun sitting in the 11th. Are they inheriting like their father's identity or fame or status or
we could say here, let's say the qualities that the 11th house is expressing, because the sun has to do with identity, that identity conditioning and how the person behaves, for example, in the 11th house is coming from the father. Yeah, we could say something like that. But this house in itself, and if someone comes to just understand the narrative of their life and their chart, the father doesn't become a focal point. In the 10th house, it would. In the 9th house, it would. Even the sun in the 4th house, it would. But the sun in the 11th house is indirectly talking about the father, whereas those other placements are directly talking about the father. Like in the 10th house, we saw one of the significations of the 10th house is the father. In the 9th house is the parents. Even in the 5th house is the creator of the children. So to some degree is talking about the father, right?
okay, but here is your social like society at large.
Yeah. I
Okay.
mean, what was your father? What was one's father doing with society? Yeah, you could look at it like that.
Yeah, I guess I was just saying because you were talking about like
Yeah.
even if someone didn't have a job, like maybe they
Yeah.
inherited well or they're famous because of their parent. And I
Yeah.
was just wondering if they had a connection, like they could just have all this like fame or whatever because of their parent.
Yeah, you could, because this house is indicating your social status, and the sun represents the father, and the sun represents one's identity. You can extract that part from the sun in the 11th house. How important is social status to them? And that come from the father, or maybe
Yeah.
it's not, and maybe that comes from the father. So these kinds of things, yeah, you could read into them for sure, but you have to look at the dynamic of the chart too, right?
No, I guess I just brought it up because I thought like the way you said, like someone might not even have a job, but they
Right.
may just be famous for being, you know what I mean? Like, so
Right.
I was just wondering, like maybe they're famous actually only because of their dad,
Yeah.
or their dad is a politician or a prominent person in society. So therefore, by default, I don't know.
Yeah, it is talking to one's status in society, especially with the sun being such a illuminated figure.
So what kind of gains is the sun getting in the 11th?
Yeah, I was going to talk about this. You know that saying, your success is not what you do, is who you know?
Yeah.
Sun in the 11th house comes to be a definition of that almost. They could be the person you want to know, or they have a knack for connecting with people who are in the know. It's the sense about vision, is about light, is about making things known. It's important in life. Like parents who pay some attention to this and how they raise their children. Like, I want my children to go to a good school because of the network that they're going to build. Like, even if you go to like Yale and Harvard, all of the Ivy League schools, yes, you're getting an exceptional education, but you're also meeting people who know people who know people, where later on in life, when you want to get a job, you have direct access to people with high status and great position, right?
Yeah.
So the sun becomes really well equipped. They will meet, let's say, politicians and entrepreneurs who are on top of their game, and they could become such people too. So talk about being in this kind of know. Of course, you're more apt at making profit and gains out of the 11th house. The sun is great for this. So if they can utilize this, and when the sun's in good condition, generally that will indicate they can utilize this and they'll be able to do this, you know?
Okay. So basically they gain through socialization or social circles.
Yeah, because of the high status of people, so they get to be seen, or they can be that high status people where other people will want to connect with them. So this is actually helping their social network, right? In the 11th house. When the sun's functional, this becomes a useful factor in the 11th house. And again, the same very aspect, again, when the sun is not in good condition, it connects itself to the ego problem again. To be in the know and to be with high status people and to make money, to make income, to profit, these become actually part of your identity. And if someone's either chasing for it their entire lifetime, or if they lose it, then they have an identity crisis. So all of these things can become problematic too when the sun's not in a good condition in the 11th house.
Does this person is their goal to make money? Okay, so if it's in a bad condition, they're just it's just basically ego and chasing money.
Yeah, they'll still want it. They still want the network. They still want to use their status because the sun is the king. Do you know what I mean? They need to have that sense, like, I am somebody here and I have to do this. And this house is about making income and profit. So yeah, the sun wants all of these things, but if it doesn't have the power to do it, that's what a weak sun means. It's just that it's not being supported. So it can't express its potential, right? It still has all the sun qualities, but it just can't express it. And the 11th house will always be the 11th house. And it's trying to do 11th house things and it's struggling. But then the self, the identity aspect of the sun too has a kind of a self-perception. And if its identity is so status oriented, for example, and if it can't match it up in the 11th house, it's going to feel a sense of suffering. Right. We want sun in a good sign that supports it, for example. We want it with good aspects and conjunct planets that will support it. Like Sun conjunct Mercury, for example, in the 11th house really helps Sun out. Sun and Venus. Sun and Jupiter can become a little pompous sometimes, but even then, Jupiter is a benefic. You know, but putting Sun on Mars, that's like hell in the making in the 11th house. Sun and Saturn, imagine that social circle. No one talks. It's like a funeral, basically. Everyone's just like gathering. The social gathering is like related to something like that. So yeah, it's nice to have some connecting points to the sun in the 11th house that will help it.
What about the nodes?
The nodes amplify.
So if you have a bad condition sun, it's gonna also amplify that. Obviously, if you have a good one, it'll amplify that. Yeah,
you know, every time you put the nodes with the two luminaries, the sun and the moon, it will create very intense dynamics, especially Rahu with the sun, because the entire objective of North Node Rahu is to eat the sun. And Ketu, its entire objective has to do with eating the moon or digesting the moon because it doesn't have a head. Like Rahu with the sun will augment this authoritative quality of the sun, for example. It just amplifies it to the oomph degree. Like you will have no doubt if there's a sun Rahu conjunct in the 11th house in a social gathering, you know who to look for to get directions. So it creates these kinds of dynamics. Ketu sun in the 11th house, I wouldn't call it the most pleasant placement. There might be like some doubts about one's self-confidence, for example, and how someone handles themselves in social gathering. You know, that sense of awkwardness that comes. The awkwardness can come from both of the nodes. The Rahu create a kind of a feeling like I'm misunderstood, and Ketu will create so much discomfort for the sun, which is your sense of self and supposed to have confidence. These are the people who will tell you, I like one-on-one dynamics. I don't like to be in a group setting. And they will avoid it like the plague with Ketu sitting with the sun in the 11th house. And sometimes you need that because your success is contingent on that. You need to make money. Like you need to do that. But a Ketu sun person will shun it. And then that will hinder these aspects of life. They'll be the kind of people where people message them from back in the day and they will not respond because they just feel detached in that sense. But Rahu and the sun, the person will message their person from grade 2. So it's just like you can see how they intensify and amplify, but going in opposite directions almost. But I personally would rather have Rahu and sun in the 11th than Ketu and sun because, and there's an enjoyment factor. And Ketu's not exactly Mr. Enjoyment. It's just renouncing everything all the time. I need to renounce enjoyment of the 11th house. This is the guy who will deactivate their Instagram account like 300 times and then go back to it.
No.
Like, I need it for work, but I can't do it. This is disgusting. Yeah, one of the other dissonances that can come from the sun in the 11th house is seeking validation. 11th house can become kind of like a dopamine house because it has to do with enjoyment and it has to do with the busy houses, especially the 11th house. I keep thinking it's more than the other houses. You know, in neuroscience, they say that other people can control your nervous system because of the interaction that you have with them. So it's like sitting with a depressed person. You can come out of that room, you are fine. You come out of that room completely depressed. You might not be feeling so well. You sit with a person who has a lot of energy and vitality. You come out feeling energized. It's the 11th house because it's constantly dealing with other people and external situations. A person can become addicted to validation, like going on social media, for example. Why do people check their social media to see who liked what, who comments this and that? This is it's counting validation. You need your sense of self, for example, validated in some way because this is the sun sitting in the 11th house. So you can get these kinds of and this is an issue because you don't want a sense of validation externally. Like one of the phrases that really bothers me nowadays, and it's become very common, when people say thank you for validating me. I'm like, in what world has this phrase become normal?
Kind of like my truth.
My truth. Yeah, my truth. Okay, it's like, yeah, we all have our truth, but then we have to cooperate with other. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, these are weird things that the sun in the 11th house can bring about when it's not very strong. So yeah, it could become dependent on its external status and defining its own identity and sense of self, how other people perceive it and the validation that it gives it to, again, have a sense of self. It can have an ego identity, put out a persona to be perceived a certain way. And usually it's for its luminous qualities, qualities at the sun. Like some people, if you actually know them really well, you know they struggle with a sense of confidence. But they have this persona externally where other people will perceive them as being super confident. And in life, in order to be happy and sane, your internal sense and your external persona, or that backstage face and the front stage face, have to have a correspondence. When they are too far apart, this is how we get mental turmoil. We get anxiety. This is one of the reasons why social media does this. Because in your actual life, you might be hurting in the backstage of your life and in your internal self, but the persona that you portray externally, because you want that status, that validation, that belonging to the group, is something completely different. And then that's your ego. That's why I always say that your ego is the way you negotiate with the external world. So the external world sees you as this very happy, upbeat person. No one is ever going to call you and be like, are you okay? Can I help? Can I be there for you? It's because there's such a distance between the ego persona and the person's actual sense of self. And when the sun has this dissonance, because the sun represents the self, ego, identity, all of these things, it can start to create problems in the 11th house. It creates a disconnect. So the person might seem like all that externally, but they're suffering in their personhood in themselves. Yeah, this is the kind of struggles that can come out of the 11th house. And another
Okay, so
thing
they are almost faking it.
well, I guess we could call it faking it. Yeah, either consciously or unconsciously. Yeah. Because some people are conditioned from childhood to really care what other people think of them. That acceptance at any cost is just socialized from day one. So they do it, but it's not because they're trying to be fake. In reality, they are, because their internal is always unhappy, always unsatisfied, always feeling a lack and a gap in themselves, like they're not enough. But externally, they just have to do this thing anyway. So this kind of dissonance is just, but it's subconscious. It's not even, they're not trying to be fake, consciously fake. They don't have a malicious intent. It's just that's how they're raised. And even when you bring it up to them, it's like, that's so rude. Like, I have to be this way. They'll have a bunch of justifications for it too. I wanted to wrap this house by talking about the Kāma aspect of it, because we've been talking about it pretty much in every video about the sun going through the houses.
Yeah, sorry.
So this is the last Kāma house, and for all the Kāma is the goal of life. We've been talking about it in the videos. And the goal of life related to the 11th house is about Kāma, which is about how do we enjoy things. It's about the enjoyment, art of enjoyment. And the Kāma houses are 3, 7, and 11. And if we
seven, I get. Why 3? I would have thought 4. I thought, okay, maybe not.
No, because the first house is Dharma, second house is Artha, third house is Kāma, fourth house, the watery house.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And then we'll repeat the pattern again for 4 times. So that's why there's 3 of them. There's something about Kāma aspect of life where it requires other people, that interaction with other people, these 3 houses. And the third house is like we're interacting with other people to meet our own desires. In the 7th house, we're cooperating with another person and creating a union. Now in the 11th house, we're mingling. So when people think enjoyment comes from purely solitary things in life, these goals of life, the way that they're relating themselves to these houses, it's like we need other people for enjoyment, for example. And this is the last Kāma house. I think we pretty much talked about how the sun can struggle with this Kāma aspect of the 11th house, to just let go, be loose, just chill, go with the flow, create equality, equilibrium, be egalitarian. The sun has a little bit of problem. So this Kāma aspect of the house doesn't fully become functional. So it's not like having a Venus here would be great for the Kāma. Having Mercury here would be great for the Kāma aspect of this house. But having malefics, for example, in this house and serious planets, it doesn't allow one to fully understand the art of enjoyment that comes out of the 11th house. If you have an objective only for, let's say, status and being known and making a profit in the 11th house, you miss the point of that social aspect of it. And the art of being social is complex and you can't be the focal point. So this Kāma aspect of this house becomes problematic. On the other hand, we have a functional sun here. This is also the person who invites everybody over to their house and have a huge party,
Oh, okay, if it's functional. Okay.
Yeah, so they can create that enjoyment for other people and they're mingling in there,
Yeah, they like to be entertainers or host people, and okay.
Yeah, people who throw like, I don't
dinner
know,
parties and whatever.
White parties, and like they're the leader. They're bringing everyone together and they're making a profit maybe out of it, even better for the sun here. But yeah, in that sense, then the sun is actually apt at creating enjoyment for other people. But again, itself might be working, being objective oriented in the 11th house. And then we kind of have to question, like, how much enjoyment is there in that in terms of what the 11th house is telling us what enjoyment is? Yeah, maybe the person gets a kick out of working all the time and creating these functions and events, but it's still work. Like, are you doing the 11th house stuff? Kāma aspect of this house, the sun doesn't allow one to fully enjoy, embrace, and immerse in the experience. It still wants to be the center and everything orbits around there, whereas the 11th house doesn't necessarily have a center. It's just mingling. So basically, this was the summary of
Sun into the 11th house.
Sun in the 11th house, the basics to know. And then when we go to the 12th house, that'll probably be a longer video. Sun in the 11th house is quite complex.
You mean Sun in the 12th?
I mean, sorry, Sun in the 12th. Thank you for correcting me. Yeah, Sun in the 12th. And then we're done. Unbelievable. And then just to give Sun more light of its day, we should work it backwards.
What do you mean?
You know, if you the chart has a forward narrative,
Yeah.
right? So going from house 1, 2, 3 all the way to 12. And then
Yeah,
the
most people
narrative,
get that.
yeah, and the narrative of the chart has a narrative going backwards. It's like the primary and the secondary motion of the chart. It'll give you a very different perspective. Maybe we'll do one of the planets going backwards. Maybe like Mercury, especially since as soon as it goes into the 12th, it becomes like, I don't have words. How do I describe this? Yeah, we'll do maybe one of the planets going the other way, just to get
Oh,
a
that's
feel
interesting.
for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I've never looked at like like you kind of understand house 1 through 12.
Yeah.
Never thought about it from 12 to 1.
Yeah. And you know, if you think about it, even with the sun's narrative actually makes a lot of sense going backwards. Because the sun is like it's in full power in the first house. If we start making it go backwards, it's like, you know, you wake up in the morning, that's like the first house. You have like 1 hour where you're groggy and nothing really makes sense and you're just in a limbo state till you have your coffee and just shower. That's like the 12th house. And then you're in traffic and just getting yourself to work. That's the 11th house. And then you're at work and it's around noon hour now. That's the 10th house. And then you're coming back. So you can take the hours of the day. And actually, if you look at how we operate as human beings, the movement of the sun going, it's an inverse going through 12, 11, 10, all the way to 1 actually is more of an accurate representation of how we function throughout the day than from 1 to 12. And the signs, hour by hour, move clockwise. The planet through their transits move counterclockwise. So there is a narrative going both ways, right? And hour by hour is more a representation of our day because the signs will change every hour and they will go from the first house to the 12th to the 11th to the 10th. Well, the planets throughout the month, like the sun, which takes 30 days, goes through a sign counterclockwise. So yeah, these are, I was like saying in one of the first videos we did about the sun, we can cast a different kind of a gaze onto the chart to see a different narrative. This is one of them. We'll do one of the planets going backwards just for
Yeah, that's pretty.
Yeah. Should we add anything? Can you think of anything?
No, I think you talked about pretty much.
All right. So that was for our planet through the houses, sun in the 11th house. Next episode, which will be the last one for the sun through the houses, will be sun in the 12th house. That'll be fun. Thank you, Jay.
Thank you.
That's it for now. Much love. Till next time.